Our intersection scholars have submitted recordings looking at their grand challenge questions and the 3 courses that they've taken as part of the Intersection Scholars Program. They're highlighting the things that they learned in the course, how they interact with each other, the different perspectives from all the different departments their courses were taught in, as well as anything that might have surprised them. They're also going to be highlighting how they're going to engage with that question moving forward in the future, either in the rest of their time at UF or post-graduation. So please join me in celebrating our scholars as they use their knowledge of the humanities to impact the world.
Hi everyone, my name is Kira McAlevey.
Dante Bellany.
Natalie Briel.
Sarah Lotman.
Josh Wazork.
Alex Sherman.
Maria Taveri.
Brittany Finley.
Chase Law.
Gabrielle Chate.
Hannah Lazar.
Catherine Yonkness.
Gail Zoran.
Bailey Levesky.
Alexandra Gomez.
In the Intersection Scholars Program, the grand challenge question I focused on was how can we engage ethical issues in public life?
The Intersection's grand challenge question that I'll be answering is how do Black and Latinx people shape global and local cultures, politics, and economies?
So for the past 2 years, I've been actively investigating what the world might look like without mass incarceration.
Mass incarceration.
Mass incarceration.
Mass incarceration.
The courses I have taken have taught me that often mass incarceration serves to ensure that those on top of the socioeconomic ladder have more power, while those at the bottom are meant to pay the consequences.
The institution of mass incarceration is one that disproportionately targets minority communities. This is represented, in part, by the fact that African Americans make up only 14% of the U.S.'s total population. However, African Americans make up over 40% of the U.S.'s total prison population.
I assumed that perhaps people were engaging in more criminal behavior, or perhaps police and law enforcement were being more stringent and strict. What I found out, however, was that mass incarceration is an issue permeating with racism and discriminatory policies and practices. It is often the effect of more privileged communities exerting punishment on minority communities as a form of social control, time and time again erroneously linking criminality to race.
Each class provided me with a different insight on how to evaluate various public issues we face in our society with an ethical outlook. One of the main themes I saw throughout all 3 courses about engaging in ethical issues was the importance of discussing and recognizing how every group in society is affected, either negatively or positively, by an issue. While this may seem like an obvious factor, one thing I saw was that people making decisions on ethical issues, which were usually people who were white, men, or in the upper class, seemed to discount minorities in their analysis of the best options because those underrepresented groups' voices are rarely heard, but they are the ones sometimes affected the most by ethical decisions. That is why it is imperative that there needs to be more representation of people from every group in society in decision-making positions, so that when decisions are made that affect everyone will have a voice in that decision.
In order for there to be real change, society needs to be engaged. As I learned in my class, in order for something to be considered a social problem, society must take an interest and deem it one. Therefore, the more people that know about this issue and engage with it, the more opportunities we'll get to see real reform.
I think that the humanities are extremely important to how we as individuals define ourselves. Learning and experiencing other cultures and traditions helps shape our global outlook, something I've learned to value as an intersection and international scholar. Being a well-rounded scholar with access to the arts and cultures of others is a special privilege that should be emphasized in all education. It is the foundation for a strong individual who is able to actively engage in the world around them.
Through studying humanities, I have been able to take an interdisciplinary approach to the issue of mass incarceration, from an anthropological analysis into social constructs of race, to a sociological look into why and how people approach and engage in racism, and finally, a political science perspective into the history and laws that have allowed this criminal justice issue to thrive.
Ultimately, my time spent studying the humanities has allowed me to have a better understanding of this issue by teaching me of the many ways in which institutional and systematic racism manifests in society.
Really, all 3 of those classes gave me a better perspective on mass incarceration
and made me realize that a world without mass incarceration would be a lot more different than the one we have now than maybe I thought. I didn't realize how far-reaching this issue was into our culture.
I would say that a world without mass incarceration would be less racially divided, more equal for all members regardless of economic status, and less corrupt because there would not be politicians and businesses interfering with the building of prisons and the prison industrial complex.
It was one of those things where I felt that the solution to this grand challenge question would be something difficult that would have to slowly be created and implemented. However, there are small steps, such as integrating the police force, that can make such a huge difference. The Intersection Scholar program really allowed me to look into a topic that I was very interested in without having to pick up a whole new minor. It gave me a lens to look through in my classes that I may not have necessarily thought of before.
From the class on Black Atlantic thought, I learned about some of the most prominent issues and figures in African American history, and the desire to keep learning more about them was instilled in me. I was not sure what to expect from this class when I enrolled in it, but what I got was a deep understanding of African American thought and writing throughout American history. I feel that the material taught in this course should be given more weight and review in mainstream history classes, which are undoubtedly whitewashed.
The humanities have allowed me to answer this question because they all came together to answer a question that can't be answered with a formula. Humanities teaches you how to think about something, think like a human. You owe it to the human race to create the best society that you can for everybody. It's what you ought to do.
For a world without mass incarceration to exist, people need to be aware that they have an implicit bias. And they also need to stop stereotyping and treat everyone equally.
It was really helpful for me to get a perspective on the historical legacy of Jim Crow and then how that played into the war on crime, war on drugs, and how that led to where we are today. It was also very helpful in understanding how race operates on an everyday level and how there are incredibly large consequences for our implicit association with color and crime. And I hadn't thought about it that way before, and that class really helped me to understand that better.
So, what does this mean for the supposed purpose of prison? We're told that we must incarcerate mass numbers of people every year to keep people safe. Yet, prisons do not appear to be the most efficient way to accomplish this. So I already had some background knowledge about mass incarceration before I started working on this project and taking these classes, but they allowed me to more deeply understand different dimensions of mass incarceration, some of which I would have never even thought to read into or research about. For instance, I would have not thought about the intersection of disability and mass incarceration had I not taken the history of disability class.
After completing this program, as well as completing my degree in African American Studies, I realize now more than ever how important it is for me to share the knowledge that I have with anyone who is willing to listen.
I feel like the humanities are just very forgiving, and they really allow you to conduct qualitative research without being bound by a really specific sort of question. And it allows you to explore different nuances and different problems from different sides and different lenses. So being able to sort of dip into these different courses in completely different majors really showed me the way that different people can kind of have their own take on this problem, and it made me realize that because everyone has such a different opinion on these problems, that in of itself is going to be hugely difficult, or it's going to be difficult to overcome the question of how we're going to resolve mass incarceration when everyone has such a different take on the root causes of mass incarceration.